Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So in today's tutorial, we're going to learn how to interact with databases using the Python programming language. So in the last tutorial, I made a video on SQL, like how to write your the query structured language code, and how to create databases, insert the information into database, retrieve the information, update the information, delete the information, and all of that stuff. So I want to take this a bit further. So now we're going to look how to interact with databases and not using something like MySQL Workbench or any other editor, any other tool that you use to interact with a database, but you're going to be using Python to interact with databases. So let me show you how to write Python code to talk to an SQL or basically a MySQL or an SQL database. So that's what we're going to cover in this tutorial. We're going to cover everything from the basics. I'll show the installations and everything, and the knowledge from the last tutorial where we learned about the basics of databases, how to write simple queries, how to create databases, how to delete databases, and all of that is going to be crucial and it's going to be important in this video. So if you haven't watched out the last tutorial, please kindly go ahead and check that video out. I'm going to leave the link, is going to be in the description. If I remember, I'm going to keep a card up here so you guys can click on that card and get access to the video, because all the SQL code that we'll be writing in this tutorial is covered in the last tutorial. Okay, so without much talking, we can just jump into it. So basically, I'm going to be learning how to interact with databases using the Python programming language. Okay, so you don't have to use any special editor or anything like that. You're going to be interacting with MySQL database using Python. So there are a couple of prerequisites that you need to have in order to follow along with this course. So the first thing you need to do, you need to have MySQL server installed on your machine, or you have a way of connecting to an SQL server. So you can either connect to a local one or a one that is remotely. Okay, but I prefer that you use a local MySQL database because it's much simpler. And I'm going to show how to do that in this tutorial. Even if you have a remote one, it's also fine. You can feel free to use that if you are okay with that. And yeah, so you need to have that installed MySQL server, MySQL database running on a machine. You have to have MySQL Workbench so you can see, we can check the database to see if there's any actually get a visual view of the database. And also we need to have Python installed on the machine. So that's the only three things that you need to have installed. And also, of course, you need a code editor to follow along to write your code. So let's look at the course outline and what you're going to be covering in this course. Okay, so in this tutorial course, we're going to be learning about how to install the dependencies. We're going to be learning how to install MySQL connector for Python. You're going to learn how to install .env and all the necessary libraries that we need for this tutorial. And also we'll be looking at how to connect to it. We'll move on to step 2, which is just learn how to connect to a simple database, so using Python. And then later on we'll take all the basics that we have learned and convert it into something more object-oriented programming, right, using an OOP concept. So we're going to be converting that into a class. So maybe if you're building an application, you can have your code and your code base more structured. So we're going to be using we're going to learn how to convert our basic code into something of a class that you can use in other projects and so on. And then finally, but not the least, we're going to go ahead and have the conclusion of the video. Okay, so let's move on to the first step. And in the first step, you're going to learn how to install all the dependencies. So we need to have a couple of dependencies installed. In this case, you're going to have 3 dependencies installed. So we need to install the Python MySQL connector. We also need to install .env because we want the .env help us to handle our databases, while the MySQL connector help us to connect to MySQL databases. Okay, so that's the three things that we need to install. So just go ahead, pause the video, copy these commands, and make sure that you have them installed. But before you do that, let's actually go ahead and do this together. So what I'm going to go ahead and do right now, I'm in the directory in which I want to create my project directory. So I'm going to create another directory. I'm just going to say mkdir. Mkdir is just a command for making directories. If you don't want to use the terminal, or are not comfortable using the terminal, then feel free to create a normal folder, project folder. Okay, so I'm just going to use the terminal and call it I'm going to call this one Python let me just say Python SQL tutorial. Okay, just like that. So I'm just going to change directory into that. So I'm just Python and then simply say Python SQL, and then simply type go inside of that directory. So once I'm inside of that directory, I did an ls, which is just going to list the content of that directory. And you can see right now I have nothing inside of this directory because this is just an empty folder, right? So great. So now that I have that directory created, what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a Python virtual environment. And you're going to be using this Python virtual environment to install the libraries, because I don't want my Python I want my global Python dependencies separate from my project by this project or this yeah, this project dependency. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is simply create a virtual environment. And to do that in Python, the command is different from operating system to operating system. The command that I'm going to be using in this video is going to work for Linux and MacBooks, but if you're on Windows, the command is a bit different. So if you're a Windows user, just quickly do a quick Google search and then see how to create a virtual environment on Windows. I think I should make a video about how to do that because mostly a Linux user and I don't have a Windows machine. But I'm going to do that one day and I'll create a video to show how to do that in Windows. But it's actually very, very simple. It's just one line of command that you need to use. Okay, so and let me just go ahead and type out this command, and it's going to work for MacBook and Linux as I said. So I'm going to say Python 3 and then dash m venv. There's a space venv, and then I'm going to call my virtual environment venv. Okay, so run that, and that's going to go ahead and create for us a Python virtual environment. And once my virtual environment is created, I'm going to run an ls, and now I can see a folder on appearing up here called a venv. So now we have a folder called venv, and that's our Python virtual environment. So I'm going to go ahead and activate it. Again, the command I'm going to use is only going to work for MacBooks and Linux machine. So if you're on Windows, the command is different. So check out the code base on the Python documentation on how to activate a virtual environment for Python on Windows. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and activate my virtual environment. And to do that is actually very simple. You have to say source venv and then /bin/activate, and this is going to go ahead and activate my virtual environment. And how do I know the virtual environment is activated? You can see the name of the virtual environment inside of parentheses in the beginning of the line right here. So this is the name of the virtual environment, and you can see it's also here in the parentheses in the beginning of the line. So that shows that my virtual environment is activated, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and clear my terminal. Great. So once the terminal is cleared, I want to go ahead and install the library. So let me just look at the command to install. So if the command is pip install mysql-connector-python and then equals to 3.0.30, right? This is the version that I want because I don't want you guys to have to have any deep change in the updates and any issue with the library. So I want to just install this specific one to follow along. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and simply say pip install mysql connector and then hyphen python, and then it's going to say equals to this is 8.0.30, and then simply run enter. So once I run this, is going to go ahead and install that library for me. So now it's installed and it's going to be installed inside of my virtual environment that we have created. So once I have that, I'm also going to go ahead and see what's the next command. And the next command I want to install is the python.env to handle our password because I don't want to show you my password. So if whenever you have a password or any confidential information that you want to hide or keep in any information that you have inside of a .env file that you want to get access to in your Python code, then you need to install python.env. And this one proto above this already installed, and it comes with my Python MySQL connector, and you can see right here it's already installed, right? So great, you can see it right here, it's already installed. So now what we need to install now is just the python.env 2.0.21.0, right? So I'm just going to say pip install, and then I'm going to say this is the python -env, and then you can say equals to 0.21.0. okay, and then simply run enter. So once I run enter, you can see now that it's all already installed. So I can just do a pip if you want to see all the installed libraries. So you can say pip freeze, and then say pip freeze, and then simply you can just simply run that, and it's going to list all the libraries that we have installed. So we have installed all these libraries, and these are the ones that I specified right here, right? So we have all those libraries installed. So once you have all those libraries installed, it's also always a good thing in Python to create a requirements.txt file. So let's go ahead and actually create a requirements.txt file. So I'm going to say pip and then freeze, and then simply say requirements .txt file, and then simply do that. So if it's what basically does is that it creates a requirement.txt file and fills it with this content that the pip freeze is going to output. So you can do cut and then simply say requirement.txt, and it's going to list that those things. On Windows, I don't think the cut command is there, but yeah, for if you're on MacBook and Linux, those commands work for you. So yeah. So that's basically it. So once you have the libraries installed, again, you don't have to do all the requirement.txt file. You don't have to do any of that. And if you want, you can also install the libraries inside of your Python global dependencies. Okay, it's not an issue. Okay, but I just want to have a separation of concerns. Okay, so once I have that installed, so let's just go back in here. Let's look at part one, which is just installing the dependencies. So let's move on to part two, which is connecting to our database. Okay. So we're going to write code to connect to our database. So what I'm going to here and do is I'm going to go ahead and simply open my VS Code. Okay, so I'm going to open up my VS Code, which is this right here. Feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable working with. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and just create a simple file. I'm going to call it basics underscore 01.py. And then inside of basics1.py, this we're going to write our first part, which is just connecting to our database. So let's go ahead and import all the libraries that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say from mysql, I'm going to go ahead and import connector. So I'm going to say connector just like that. And I'm also going to go ahead and import .env. So I'm going to say from .env import load env. Okay, just like that. So I'm going to have a function right here. I'm going to say dev. I'm going to simply say connect underscore to underscore let's say db. So we're going to connect to db. So what we need to connect to a db is we need the host underscore name or the host url, like where the server the mysql server is. And you need a username, and then we also need a password. So just these are the things that we need. Okay, so I'm going to take those as arguments, and then sorry, as parameters. Now I'm going to simply create a connection object, and it's going to be by default, it's going to be none. Okay, so I'm going to simply have a try and except block here. The reason why having a try and except block is actually trying to connect to a database that might work or it might not work. Okay, so I'm just going to say pass, and you're going to have an exception here. This is going to be exception, so I'm going to say exception, and this is going to be, you're going to say connector dot error. So connector dot error as error, just like this, and you're simply going to print out that error in case it occurs. So you're going to use an s string. You're going to say error, and you're going to simply go ahead and simply do use the curly braces right here, and if simply output that error. Okay, so in case there is any error, this except block is going to get activated, and it's going to print out the error. So in case there is no error, what do we want to try? Okay, so I'm going to say connection, and this is going to be equals to connector dot connect. So I'm going to say connector dot connect, and you need to provide in a couple of things here. So the first we need to provide is the host. So the host is going to be equals to host underscore name. Okay, and you're going to need to provide in the user, and the user is going to be the username that we passed in, and then the password. So we're going to say password, and the password is simply going to be our password that we're going to be going ahead and passing in. So that's going to go ahead and create a connection for us. So once a connection is created, I'm simply going to go ahead and simply say connection. I guess simply say connection created. So I'm going to say let's just actually say print statement. So print, and you can just simply say connection to database successful. Let's say connection database successful. You can just give any statement that you want here. Good. So once that's done, I think we want to go ahead and return the connection object. So return the connection object. So great, that's basically what I want. So that's how we can create write a code to connect to our database right here. So how do we actually make sure we get a connection? So I'm going to say con, and this is going to be equals to the following. So I'm going to say connect underscore to database, and I'm going to go ahead and pass in my host name. So this I'm running my SQL server locally, so it's going to be localhost, and then it's going to be a localhost, and then the username is my username is called root. Okay, and then the password of my database. Okay, so I pass in the password right here. So I don't want to go ahead and show you my password, so that's why we have a python.env installed. So I'm going to create a I'm going to create a .env first. I'm going to say .env, that's where you keep our environment variable. So I'm just going to say password, and then equals to, and then this is where you type in your password. You just type in your password right here. Okay, so imagine this was your password, you just type it in here. So I'm not going to go ahead and actually show you this part because I don't want you guys to have access to my password. So I'm going to fill in my password right here, and in your case create a .env file, say password equals to, and then type in your password. Okay, so I'm just going to pause the video from this part, and once I'm done typing in my password, I'll resume the video. Okay. So I'm done with typing in my password. So now we want to go ahead and actually read the password from .edc.env file. Okay, so I'm just going to say load, and then load underscore dot env, and then simply call that function. This function is going to go ahead and load all the environment variables inside of our .env file inside of our Python application, so now you can get access to it. So I want to get access to it. I'm going to import os. So I'm going to simply go ahead down here and simply say os.get env, and then pass in the name of that, we call it password, right? So we said password equals to, and then our password instead of our env file. So whatever you said, for example, if you say we said password equals to and then your password, right? So that's why you have to use password, right? Because it's the key value pair, right? So it's the key, right? So if you use another word other than password, okay, then you have to use that word right here. Okay, so once we have that, let's actually run the code to make sure we are actually getting our connection to our database. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the code right here. So I'm going to simply, let me just rearrange this a bit. Let me move this on to another file, another window right there, so I can navigate like this here. So once I have that, I can simply go ahead and do, let me just check ls. I can do python 3, and then you can say basic, and then simply run that. So you can see now connection to the database has been successful. So that's how you can connect to a database from Python. So now we have our connection to our database. What's left for us to do? Now we can write different queries to interact with our database and do all of that stuff. So the first query I want us to write is, let's write a query that is going to go ahead and simply create a database for us. So I'm just going to go down here, and I'm going to say write a query to create our database. So create db database, just like this, and I'm going to say def, and we'll say create underscore db. So in you're going to pass in the connection object, and you're going to pass in a query to create our database. So that's it. So once I have this, let me just move this up so you guys can have a better view. Okay, so once I have this, I'm going to simply create a cursor object. So I'm going to create a cursor, and this is going to be called our connection dot cursor, just like that, and that's going to create for us a cursor. And you're going to use this cursor to create an object instead of our database, because basically to execute queries that is going to go ahead and create our database, right? So to do that, I'm going to use again try and except block. So let me get that spelling right. So try, and I'm going to pass this, and I'm going to have except, and I'm going to have this going to be a connector dot error as a error, and then simply go print. I'm going to use an s string, and we say error, and then simply use calibrate two calibraces, and then simply pass in the error here. So this is going to print out any error in case any error occurs. Else we're going to go ahead and run the code. So we're going to try to do this. We're going to say cursor dot execute. So execute. So we're going to execute the query that you're going to be passing in, and this query is basically an SQL query to create a database. So if you haven't don't know the basics of SQL, kindly check out my video on introduction to SQL. I'll explain everything. So we're going to be using the same commands right here. Okay, so I'm going to, once we create a database, I'm just going to say database created successfully, and that's all I want to do. So let's go ahead and actually try this out. Okay, so I'm going to say create, let me just call it query. So I'm going to say query or create database query. So I'm going to say create underscore db underscore query. So create db query is going to be, I'm going to use basically a string to write this. So I'm going to use a string literal. So this is strings instead of being in this instead of being in two quotes, right? It's going to be in form of 3 different quotes. So once we have our function created, that's going to create our database, I'm simply going to go ahead and simply try to call this function. So we need a connection object, which we already have right here. So now we also need to pass in a query. So let me write the query to actually create our database. So I'm going to say create underscore query, create db query. Let me call it create db query, and this is going to be I'm going to use string literals here. So I'm going to have 3 quotes on each side instead of having 1 quote on each side. So these are the string called string literals in Python. So I'm going to go ahead and simply pass in my SQL statement here. And if you don't know all of this SQL, we covered all the basics, so check out the video on introduction to SQL database with Python. So I'm going to simply say create database if not exists. Okay, so I'm going to give the name of the database a name. It's going to be this is going to be tutorial. I'm just going to call it tutorial database underscore py. So we can call it our database tutorial database underscore py. So this is going to be our simple database that we're going to create. So we have the query, and we also have the connection object. So now we can call our create underscore db function, and you're going to go ahead and simply pass in the name of the connection object, which is con, and then you're going to pass in now our create database query, and then simply pass in that. So create database query, we'll have it right there. So once we run this now, it should go ahead and create a database called tutorial db underscore python, right? So let me just go ahead and say I want to open up my mysql workbench. So I can just go ahead and search for mysql workbench, and I'm going to open up my sql workbench, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my password, and simply log in. So and then simply log in. So once I have this done, I'm going to I have simply logged in into my database. So if I check all the database right here, I don't have any of those database. So I can simply go ahead. Let me just try to zoom in a bit. So I can just actually write the query right here. So let me just you can see I have no database right now. So I can say show data basis, and that should now show for me any list all the database on my machine. So I can see now, and just bring this up here, you can see I have no database called tutorial db underscore python. So now if you run this code now, it's going to go ahead and create for us that database. So let's actually go ahead and actually run the code to create for us that specific database. So I'm going to go back into my my terminal and then simply run this command again. So now you can see you have database successfully created. So if I go in here and I try to, let me hit on the refresh button, so I can see that database has popped up here, and it's called tutorial db underscore python. So you can see inside of this database right now, we have no tables inside of this database. So let me actually go ahead and actually create a table that we can use to insert different stuff, that we can insert different records into. So now we can actually run this multiple times, because it's not going to, nothing is going to happen, because this database already exists. So you check if it's only going to create a database if it does not exist, right? Create db if not exists. But since already exists, we can run this code multiple times and no change is going to happen, because the database already exists. So now I'm going to write a query to I'm going to write another function that's going to execute queries, and I'm going to use this function to create a table to insert our data, because you can see right now we have no table inside of our database, which is right here. We have no table inside of our database. So let's actually write the code to do that. So I'm going to go back inside of my VS Code, and down here I'm going to actually let's say function to create to execute queries, or say to execute queries. Okay, queries, just like that. Queries just like that. Okay, now I got it right. So now I'm going to say dev, I'm going to call it execute execute query. So execute underscore query. So execute query. And then for execute query, I'm going to you need a connection object, and then you also want the query that you want to execute. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a cursor, just like we did before. Create a cursor, and we're going to use the connection object. So we're going to say connection.cursor cursor, just like this, to create a cursor object. And I'm going to have a try and except block. So pass, and then I'm going to have except this is going to be except we're going to say connector dot error, and it's going to be as we're going to accept this error as error, and you're going to simply say print, and you're going to pass in the a string here. So I'm going to say error, and then simply pass in a curly braces right here. You're going to simply pass in that error. So that's basically what I want. So now let's go up here and then write the code to execute the error. So I'm going to say cursor dot execute, and then you're going to pass in the query that we get. So we're going to execute the query that we get, and you're going to simply do cursor.commit. So I'm going to say, sorry, connection.commit, and then simply we can now alert the user that the query has been executed. So you can say query has been executed, just like that, successfully, just like that. Okay, successfully. So just like that. So that's basically it. So now basically you can see the difference between these two, this one, right? So you can see this one is different, even though it's executing a query, but this one has a commit to it, because you want to commit some to the database, like you want to write an like an insert statement, an update statement, a select statement, and all of that. We can use this basically. Okay, so this is we're going to use only this for writing delete, update, and insert statement. For the select statement, to look at how to do that, because for select statement you need to actually do a bit do it a bit differently, but this is going to be used for running insert, delete, and update queries. Okay, so once we have this done, we're going to use this to actually create a database. So we're going to say the first thing we want to do is first of all, we want to select which database to use. So you just say select the database that you want to use, and you can do different stuff with that. So the first thing I want to do is to select the database that I want to use. So I'm going to say select underscore db, and this is going to be a query. So I'm going to have the query right here, and you're going to simply say select sorry, we're going to say tell which database to use. So I'm going to simply say use, and then I'm going to use our tutorial. So tutorial db underscore py. So tutorial db underscore py means you're going to be using our Python tutorial db underscore Python database. So now let's go and actually execute this command right here, and just going to say you're going to say execute execute query, and you're going to pass in our connection object, and you're going to pass in our db. Okay, select db query, which is going to just select the database that we want to select. Okay, so once we have this, let's try to run it again. Let's see if everything works. So I'm going to go ahead and simply run it. Now everything works, so query has been executed successfully. So any operation that you're going to do from now on is going to be applied to the tutorial db database underscore Python database. Okay, so once we have that done, let's see what else we can do. So we can also use this to create a table instead of our database. So let's write a query to create a couple of tables inside of our database. Okay, so I want to create a table, and the format for this table is going to be a bit different. So let me just go to the next page. Yeah, so let me just go to the next page. So here, so we have written a connection to our database. So now I want us to look at the design of our database design. So I have a simple chart right here which I drew, and you're going to be using this to design our database. So you're going to create a database for students, you're going to create one for enrollment, and you're going to create one for courses. So right, a student can enroll in one or many courses. A course can be a student can enroll in one or many courses. A course can appear here more than one time, right? Basically in the enrollments table, right? So but there can be two students who have enrolled for the same course, or more students who have enrolled for the same course, right? So that's basically the design of our database that you're going to be using. So we're going to convert this diagram into an SQL code. Again, if you know the basics of SQL, check out my last tutorial on SQL. Okay, the link is going to be in the description of this video. So we're going to be using this to create the query for our database, and then execute this using Python. So let's actually go and write the query for this. So if you don't know this, if you don't know SQL, again, check out the video on SQL. So I'm going to say create student underscore table, and this is going to be an SQL statement. So right here. So in here, what I'm going to simply going to type out is a query to create our student database. So I'm going to say create table if not exists. So we're going to go ahead and create a table. We're going to call this table a student, right? So each student is going to have a couple of things. So let's go back in here and let's look. So each student is going to have a name, a first name, a second name, a home address, and then a parent phone number. So let's go ahead and actually add this to our code right here. So in SQL, it's always good to have a unique identifier for each of these. So we're going to have a student ID. So we call it student underscore ID, and it's going to be of type int, and it's going to be a primary key. So it's going to be our primary key. Again, I explained all of this in my introduction to SQL, the SQL tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and create an ID field, which is going to be of type int. It's going to be a primary key, and it's going to be auto incremented. Okay, so we're going to have now, after that, we're going to have first name, and the first name is going to be a variable character length. So let's say a name should not be more than let's say 50 characters. So a name should not be more than 50 characters, and yeah, that, and it should not be and should not now. Okay, and then you're going to have a second name. So we're going to say second name, and the second name should be variable character length, and it should have 60 characters in total, and it should not be now. Okay, and the second name should also be unique. So this is unique. These are just some values that I set for my database. So we have last name. Okay, the second name, let me just call this the last name instead of let me just say last name, and then yeah, that's fine. So last name, let me call it last name. Okay, so first name, last name, and then you have the home address. Okay, so the home address, and it's going to be var character, and var character, we're going to say 80 characters, not more than 80 characters. So not null, it must be filled. Okay, and then we also have the parent phone number. So the parent phone, and this is going to be a variable character and not more than 15 characters, and you can say not now. Each student must have a parent, and the parent must have a phone, right? So that's basically the query to create our database to create our student table. Yeah, that's basically it, and now we can go and actually execute this code to actually create this to create this table. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simply execute. So let me just be execute, So I'm going to say execute. So execute execute query. So we're going to use the execute query function, and we're going to pass in our connection object, and our query now is the create underscore student db right there, the student table right there. So it's going to go ahead and create a student table. So now if I go back into my SQL, you can see right now I have no tables inside of my my tutorial db. Even though I refresh it, I have no table in there, right? So now let me just go ahead and execute it, and let's see what will happen. So let's run the code. So now the query has been executed successfully. So now if I go back in here and hit the refresh button, now you can see that I have now a table. So if I scroll down, you can see I have the student table, and the student table has all these columns, which are the columns that we specified inside of our query from here. So if I go back here, these are the tables that we have here, and this is what we have on our design page as well, right? So great. So now that we have the student database created, now let's create a course database. So each course is going to have a course name and a course duration and a course ID, right? So let's go ahead and do that right here. So I'm going to go down here and just simply say create. I'm going to say create underscore. This is going to be course underscore table. Let me get the spelling right. So table, and this is going to be equals to the following. So I'm going to say create table if not exist. So I'm going to create a table if it doesn't exist yet, and I'm going to call it course, and it's going to have the following. So good. So let's type in the course content here. So each course is going to have a course underscore id, and the course id is going to be of type int, not null. You can say not null. It must be a primary key, and it's also auto underscore increment, just like that. So that's what we have there. And then now I'm going to go ahead and simply pass in. Also, I need a course name, so I'm going to say course this lowercase, so course underscore name, and the course name is going to be a variable char, so into a variable length character, so variable char, and then you're going to go ahead and pass in 70. You're going to say not now, and then you're going to say is unique. So each course name is unique, right? You can have two courses that have the same name within the same institution or faculty, like that. So you're going to have a course name, and you're going to have a course duration, like how long it takes to complete this course. And you can I'm just going to use this as Verka. You can think about this later on in design a better database. The problem is the issue here, we're not focusing on database design, so I'm just going to keep things very, very simple. Okay, so if you're interested, you can learn more and design more accurate databases, but for now I'm just going to show you. I'm just mainly focused on how to work with databases in Python, and how to interact with databases in Python, in this case mysql database. So I'm not going to focus so much on the database design, the data types and all that. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it. So we have the course ID, we have the course name, and we have the course duration column. So I'm going to go ahead and simply execute this. I'm going to say is executed. So I'm going to say execute query, and I'm going to pass in my connection object, and I'm also going to say create underscore course table. Okay, so once we run this now, it's going to go ahead and create now the course table. Now be careful, if you in your code you didn't say if not exists, right? If you don't have the if not exists part, right, then you get an error because this table already exists. So we're going to say if not exists, mean that it will create it if it doesn't exist, and it will ignore it if it already exists. In this case, we have the student database already created, so it will just go ahead and ignore it. So you can see we have it right here. So the student table already created, so you just go ahead and ignore it. Okay, so make sure that you have no if not exist, or simply just go ahead and comment out that part of your code. Okay, if you want it to run it again. So once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and simply run this again. Now you can see it has been executed. Now if I go back into my SQL and I simply go ahead and try to run this to refresh the tables, now you can see I have now two tables. I have a course table right here, and it has the columns that specify the course ID, the course name, and the course duration, which is the design that we have right here. So good, we have the course tables was created. So now the next step we're going to create is the enrollment table. Okay, so we are going to have an enrollment ID, the course ID, and then a student ID, right? Okay, so it's going to track which student enrolled to which course, basically. So to do this, I'm going to go back in here, go into my VS Code, and then let's write the code for this. So we're going to call this enrollment table. So I'm just going to say create, let me get create underscore enrollment underscore table, and this is going to be a Python string literal. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say the following. So when we say create if not exists, create table, right? So create table if not exists. We're going to give it a table a name. We're going to call it enrollments, and you're going to call the table enrollment, and you're going to now have the following fields, columns instead of our table. So the first one is going to be enrollment ID. So when we say enrollment underscore ID, and it's going to be of type int, not null, and you're going to say primary key. Yeah, that's basically it. And you're going to say auto increment, so auto underscore increment, just like that. So once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and create another column, which is going to be called the course ID column. So we say course underscore ID, and which is going to be we're going to say int and not now int. So when we int and not now, you're going to have the core student ID instead. So student underscore ID is going to be of type int and not now. That's basically it. So we have those values right there. So what I want to go ahead and do is execute this code again. So it's going to be execute query, and you're going to pass in our connection object connection, and you're also going to go ahead and pass in the query that you want to execute. So it will be create enrollment table. That's basically it. So now if you run this, now you should go ahead and create the enrollment table. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and the enrollment table is created. So you can go ahead and actually check it out. I'm not going to check that because let's move ahead and save a bit of time. So we have all our tables already created. Now I want to create the relationship between these tables. So if I go back in here, you can see these tables have a relationship, right? So this is a one-to-many relationship, and this is also a one-to-many relationship. Okay, so meaning that one student can appear, can enroll, can have multiple enrollments, and one course can be enrolled while being done by multiple students, and that's basically the table. So I'm going to go ahead and represent this relationship using SQL code. So you're just going to go ahead and simply do the following. So we're going to simply say alter underscore enroll, it will be enrollment underscore table, and this is going to be equals to the following. So it's going to be this Python string literals, and in here I'm going to go ahead and simply type in my SQL code. So I'm going to simply say alter table, and the table name is called, it enrollment, right? Call it enrollment right here. So we're going to alter the enrollment. Okay, I made an error right here, so let's actually just let's go with that error. Okay, so because I don't want to go ahead and delete the table and then create again. So if you want, you can just go ahead and drop that table and then do it again, but I'm just going to call enroll. Actually, let's go ahead and do this, right? Let's actually go ahead and do this. So I'm going to go ahead and say execute query. This is a good practice for you guys as well, in case you made any typos. And you're going to simply say, let me just type in the query. I'm going to say drop I'm going to say drop table, and the table name is going to be enrollment, okay, instead of enrollment. Okay, so once we have this done, I'm going to actually let's actually run this code to see if everything works. So let me just go back in here and then run the code. So that's done. So we don't have the table anymore called enrollment. So let me just go ahead and in here, and then simply now change the name to enrollment instead of enrollment, and now simply comment this out because that table doesn't exist anymore. So this is how you can drop tables if you want. So once we made, like, if you made an error, this is how you can solve that error. So once we have that, now everything should be done. So you can go ahead and actually check. Let me just refresh this. You can click on this part to refresh it. Now you can check we have the courses, and let me just minimize this and also minimize this for now. So we have the enrollments, and which has these values right here. So enrollments, right? The spelling is right this time around. So good. So once we have that done, I'm just going to alter table, and I'm going to say give it the right spelling, enrollment, and I'm going to simply say add. I'm going to simply add, and I'm going to say foreign key, and you're going to add a foreign key called student underscore ID, which already exists. We're going to say for a student ID is a foreign key, but what does it reference? So we're going to say references, references, and it is going to references the student table. So student table, the student table, right? Which part of the student table? The student table, which column? Using the ID. So if I go back into this diagram, so we're referring to this student ID column from the enrollment table is referring to the student ID column from the students table, and that's basically what you are saying right here. So add and alter the enrollment table. I'm adding a foreign key called student enrollment, which is this key right here, which is this one right here. And what is it referring to? It's referring to student table, the student ID column, which is the students table, right? The student ID column. So basically, which is basically the primary key. Okay, so once you have done that, if you want to check more concepts of more primary key and foreign keys, you can check out my tutorial on introduction to my introduction to databases with SQL. Okay, okay. So I'm going to say cascade right here, cascade here, and then simply execute, and that with a with a colon. So that's basically how we're going to simply go ahead and have our database. So that's basically it. So once we have this done, I'm going to also write another table. I'm going to call this, I'm going to now adding another foreign key. So I'm going to go basically copy this right here, copy it, and then simply move down here, paste it again. So we're going to have this going to student, this is going to be 2. I'm just going to add the 2 here. So now we're going to have another column right here. This is going to be for the course. So I'm going to change this to be course underscore id, and this is also going to be course, let me just say course underscore id, right? So we're referring to the course id from the enrollment table, which is referring to the course id instead of the course table. So that's basically it. So yeah, so once we have that done, we can go ahead and execute our code, and everything should work as we expect it to. So I'm just going to go in here, and down here I can execute the code. So I'm going to say execute. So execute query. I'm going to pass in my connection object. Now the first one, I'm going to say alter the student table like this, the enrollment table. I'm going to say let me just copy this right here. I'm just going to copy it and paste it again, and then they change this to be 2, right? So we're going to run these 2 queries. So once that's done, we can go ahead and insert data into our tables basically. So yeah, that's basically it. And let's go ahead and actually insert data. Let's execute this code, and then let's see if it works. So run this code. It has been executed successfully, right? So that shows that we have set up our foreign keys instead of our table. So once our foreign keys are set up, what I want to go ahead and do is now insert some data into our database, right? That's the fun part of it all. So we're going to insert data into the database. So I'm going to go in here and say insert data, and what data are going to go ahead and do, you're going to say insert insert underscore let's say insert student, right? We're going to insert students, let's say student, let's say students. Actually, let me just insert a couple of students from this. So I'm going to go ahead and write the query to insert data. So insert into student, the students table, right? And you're going to pass in the value. So you can say first name. Again, I explained all of this in my last introduction to SQL code, so you can check out that tutorial. So the first name, we have the home address, and then we have the parent parent phone, right? But parent phone right there. And you're going to go ahead and pass in the values. So the values, I'm going to pass in the values. So values, and the values are going to be a couple of values. So we're going to have the first value being the following. So we're going to say the first name is going to be John, right? So we're going to have John. So let me just get the spelling right. So John, and then we have Doe, right? So John Doe is the last name, and then the address, right? So the home address, I'm just going to stay in Nairobi 0222, because I'm currently in Nairobi here in Kenya, but in East Africa. So I'm going to go ahead and simply pass in some number here. So this is Kenyan code, and I'm just going to pass in some random phone number right here. And yeah, that's basically it. And I can insert more if I want. So I can insert more. I can say here this is gonna be Janet, Janet. So close of that. So Janet, let's get Janet Thomas. Let me just give it a place here. So this is gonna be Mombasa. Mombasa is a very famous tourist destination in Kenya. So if you're maybe traveling, think of coming to Kenya, then you might consider Mombasa is a really nice place. So just going to pass in the phone number 254, which is country code for Kenya, and then simply end that up. So once I have that, I can simply end this with a semicolon right here. So this is going to go ahead and insert this data into our database, right? So that's basically it. Now I want to write code to insert something. So I'm going to say insert, and you're going to go ahead and also insert the courses. Okay, so insert courses, and it's going to be just like this. So just like this, and then insert the courses. So I'm going to say insert into. We're going to insert into. We're going to insert into our courses table, and you're going to have the course underscore name, and then the course underscore duration, just like that. And then you're going to go ahead and say values. So values, and the values are going to be let me just keep it format this a bit, and then duration, close of that, So we have the course and then the course duration, and then we have the values, and the values are going to be the following. So the values are going to be I'm going to say BBIT, which is just a diploma degree course, BBIT, like business information technology, and the duration you're going to say is going to be 4, right? So yeah, that's basically it. So the duration you're going to say is going to be 4, right? Yeah, that's basically it for that. Duration is gonna be 4. That's basically it. So that's what I want. And then let's also repeat adding another course just for the practice sake. And then I'm going to add in another course. And this course is going to be let's say BCom, bachelor's in of commerce. And you're going to pass in like 4 years, right? Degree is typically 4 years. So so once I have this, I want to go ahead and actually add some enrollments and stuff like that. Okay, so let's actually do that right here. So I'm going to say insert um underscore enrollments, and it's going to be another Python string literals, and you're going to say insert into, and you're going to say enrollment, and then you're going to say the course underscore ID, and then the course underscore duration is going to be the following. So I'm going to say values, and then the values are going to be the following. So the values are going to say 1 comma 2. So why am I saying why 1 comma 2? So the 1 stands for the course ID. So the first course is PBIT, and 2 stands for this is going to be the student ID instead, not the course ID. So student underscore ID. So it's going to be this is the course ID and then the student ID. So student number 2, student and ID of number 2 is doing course number 1. So student and ID of number 2 is Janet, and Janet is doing a course and ID of which is BBIT. So let's actually insert another one. So then I'm going to go in here and say 2 comma 1. So a student and ID of 1, which is John Doe, is doing a course and ID of 2, which is BCom. So John Doe is doing BCom, while uh while the student and ID of 2, Janet Thomas, is going to be doing BBIT. That's basically it, what this statement is for. So once you have all these statements, now I want to go and execute all of them. So I'm going to say execute. So execute underscore query. You're going to pass in our connection object, and you're going to pass in insert underscore students, and also going to run another one. It's going to be let me just copy this right here. So copy it and paste it 2 more times. So the first one is going to be inserting students, and the second one is going to be inserting of the courses. So insert courses, so it must be in this order, and then finally we say insert the enrollment, because the enrollment depends on the two tables above. So you have to be in this order. So insert enrollment. Okay, so these two can come in any order, but the enrollment must always be the last, because it depends on the course the course students table, and also the course table, right? So that's basically it, what we need to do. So if you don't have any queries in here, so let's actually just read through this and make sure that we don't have any issues right here. So yeah, that's basically it. Hopefully we don't have any errors. So I'm just going to execute this. No, everything went successfully, and you can see the query ran, and all the queries have run successfully. So if I go back into my SQL database, and then I say let me just say let me just select everything from one table. So I'm going to say select select. You can use lowercase or uppercase. Let me just use uppercase. So select star star from this is going to be called student. Okay, so you have to specify which database you want to use. So I'm going to say use tutorial database underscore py, and then yeah, so that's basically it. So this is use and not user, so that's basically it. So once I have this, I'm going to run these 2 queries. So now this should now display for me everything right here. So let me just run this one more time again. So run this, and now you can see we have Janet Doe and John Doe and Janet Thomas all inserted into our database. So that's basically it. We have successfully been able to manage to insert data into our database. Great. So now what's left now? So I want to take this to a bit more advanced level. So now what I want to go ahead and do right now is actually learn how we can query our database, because right now we're not really querying our database. So I want to go ahead and write code that's going to go ahead and actually query our database to pull information out of our database. So to do this, I'm just going to create another file. So I'm going to call it, it's going to be basics underscore 02.py. Okay, so in basics2.py, we're going to we're going to need to connect to our database, and also we need to have the execute query command brought in, and also yeah, that's basically it. So let's actually go ahead and actually just copy it from here and just bring it right here, so we don't have to waste a lot of time. So let me just go scroll down. So I want to use until this part right here of my code, so I'm just going to go ahead and simply copy this and simply paste it right here. So right now we're just repeating code, but later on we'll show how to do this using an object oriented approach. We're going to create a class and then keep everything inside of a class to keep our code dry, right, to avoid repeating ourselves. Okay, so once we have all this, so this is just going to go ahead and we don't need to create our database again, so we just delete this. So we have only the execute statement right here, which is going to now make sure that you're going to be using our tutorials database. So now we can go ahead and actually execute this. Let me just check the code one more time to make sure you're not creating any database. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm just going to go in here, clear this up, and then simply say Python 3 basics, this one basics 2, and then simply run this. So great, great. So we're on track. So now you have only selected that you're going to be using the tutorial db underscore py database, right? So once we have all that in there, so now what I want to go ahead and do is actually fetch data from our database. So that's what we're interested in. So let's say dev, and it's going to be fetch underscore data. You're going to pass in our connection object and then the query that we want to execute to fetch our data, right? So I'm going to create a cursor again. So cursor is going to be called connection dot cursor. So let me get that spelling right. So cursor, and you're going to have a try and except block. So I'm going to say pass for now, and then simply exception except this is going to be connector dot error, right? So connector error as error, and you're going to simply go ahead and simply run that error. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is the following. So I'm going to simply say print, and this is going to be an f string. We're going to say error, and then just simply pass in that error. So the error is going to be this error, that the exception that you're trying to handle. Okay, so once we have this done, I'm going to go ahead and simply now use the make cursor. So that we created on line 56. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say cursor, and then say cursor dot execute, right? To execute, and what I want to execute is the query that the user has passed in. And then once we execute that query, we're going to simply say we're going to fetch now the data. So we're going to say result, and result equals to, right? You're going to say result equals to, and you're going to say our cursor let me just say cursor object dot fetch, just like that, fetch all, and then you're going to pass in, yeah, that this guy. So we're going to say our cursor, and it's going to fetch all the data. So it's going to execute the data, and on line 6 you're going to simply fetch the data. So I'm going to say result. By default, result is going to be none, okay, just in case we didn't find any data, and then simply going to return result, just like that. And then that's basically it. Basically, yeah, that's all we need to do. You don't have to say is none here. It doesn't really make sense. So yeah, it's just that's fine. You can have it. So try, and then create a cursor. This gonna be cursor dot execute, not cursor equals to execute. So cursor dot execute, and it's gonna execute that query. And once the query is executed, you're going to simply gonna go ahead and fetch all the data that it comes with, and then simply return those results. Okay, in case there's any exception, you're going to handle that exception right here. Okay, so once we have that, let's actually let me just say select all underscore students from our database. Now we have only 2 students, right? So let me just write a query to select all students. So I'm going to simply go ahead and say select star. Sorry, this is not what I want. So select just ladies. So select asterisk. So select everything from the student table. So select everything from the student table. So now you can go ahead and actually execute this. And once you execute this, it's going to return to us the result. So we're going to say all underscore. We're going to store the result in all students and underscore result. And it's going to be equals to fetch, like fetch data. You're going to pass in our connection object, and you're going to pass in the select all underscore student query. So we're going to pass in the select all student query. That's going to fetch our result, and it's going to return it to us. So let's actually just convert this into a Python list, just to have a list. Okay, so I'm just going to put it inside of the list function right here. Okay, we can convert that into a list for us. So once we have that, I can just go ahead and iterate through it, and then print all the student. Also print student for student in all underscore student student result, and then I'm just going to go ahead and simply print the student result out. So that's basically it. So print a student result. So for all the students, for students in all student results, print out student. That's basically what I want to do. So now we can go ahead and execute this code and see how it works. So I'm going to go into my terminal and then simply run the code again. So now you can see that it has run successfully and it has found all the students. So we can see the first one is John Doe, Nairobi, this phone number. The second one is Janet Thomas, Mombasa, and then the phone number. Yeah, so that's basically it. Okay, I can see we have some warnings trying to import something. Yeah, we're trying to import this. I don't really need this. Sometimes VS Code imports things automatically, so it can give an issue. So yeah, that's basically it, how we can select all the students from there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and try to write a bit of query to update data, right? So we're just going to use the execute query to update data. So let's actually try to update data. So let me just go back again and execute again, make sure I'm not getting any errors. Yeah, no errors, no warning. So great. So now let's try to update the name of let's say, instead of saying John Doe, let's try to say Johnny Doe. Okay, so let's try to update the name of from John to Johnny. Okay, so let's do that in here. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and create another query. So this is going to call it update underscore student, and this is going to be a string literals. Okay, string literal. So I'm going to say the following. So update student. Right, you're going to update student table, and you're going to simply go ahead and simply set the last. Let's say first name. So it's going to be a first name, right? So you can set anything you want. I'm going to do the first name. So I'm going to say Johnny. So Johnny, and then you're going to say short Johnny. Set first name to Johnny, where the student underscore id equals to 1. So the student id is 1 for the Johnny column, right? So if you go back in here and you look at John, right, the id is 1. So we're going to change that to be Johnny for the first name. So we have this query right now, so you can go ahead and actually execute this query. So we're going to go ahead and simply say execute the query. So execute query. We're going to pass in our connection object, and we're going to pass in update student update underscore student right here. Okay, so once we have that, that should update the student. So I want to go ahead and select okay, I'm doing this in the wrong file, I think. Let me see. Okay, did I do anything wrong? Okay, the code was right here. Let me see. Okay, I'm actually writing the code in the wrong place, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. I'm just going to copy all of this and move it to the right place. So sorry for that. I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. So I'm just going to cut this out from here and move it to the bottom right here. So right here. So now we're going to go ahead and execute the code, and then now yeah, so we're going to update the column. So let's move this above the select statement, so that whenever the update is made, so we can select the statement, we can select the student to see the new update, the newly updated information. So before we update, and then later we select the information that we want. So yeah, so once I have that, I'm going to go and execute this. So it has been now you can see this Johnny, it has been changed from John to Johnny. So it was previously John, now it is Johnny. So that's how you can write update statements from there. So great. You can also, let's actually write delete statement to delete student from the database. So to delete that, that's actually quite simple. So we can actually write it up here before the select statement. So we can, whenever we delete something, we select all the students, the deleted one shouldn't be present, right? So let's actually delete delete underscore student this student, and this is going to be equals to so I'm going to have a string literal here, and I'm going to say here it's going to be delete so delete from the student table, and then where the student underscore id is equals to 1. So we're going to delete everything where from where the student id is 1. So where the student id is 1, you're going to go ahead and delete it, and just basically it's going to go ahead and delete the first right here, which is going to be called Johnny. So it's going to delete all Johnny Doe's records. So that's basically it. So you can go ahead and simply say execute query, and then pass in our connection object, and then say this is going to be delete. So delete student right here. So once we have that, we can go ahead and actually run the code again. So I'm just going to go in here and run the code again. So you can see it has been deleted, and the only thing that is left is Janet Thomas, basically. Yeah, so that's basically it. So I think this, if once you're done doing this, you should comment out this code again, and if you run it, you might get an error. So let's actually run it again. Okay, you don't get an error, so it's fine. You can leave it there in your code base, but just be sure that you don't make any changes. So be careful what you delete, and if you don't need a code that you've already used, so make sure you just comment it out to avoid any issues. So great. So now we learn how to perform the CRUD functionality. So let's move on to a bit more advanced stuff. So what I want us to look at now is, let me just see what we should be looking. We have looked at how to delete and update stuff. So I want us to now learn how to execute many queries at the same time, right? So right now we are only executing a single query. So that we can insert multiple queries also. If you want to insert like multiple queries, you can do that using a Python list. So yeah, so sometimes you might read data from a file and put it inside of a list, and you want to insert all of them at once. You can be using you can just call a function once and pass in what you want, all the list items that you want to insert, and it will handle the inserting of those information for you. So that's what I want us to do. So I'm just going to go in here and just create another file. I'm going to call it basics. So I'm going to say basics underscore 03.py. Okay, so create this basics 03.py file, and I'm going to go ahead and copy code from here. So I want to copy everything, so everything from the fetch, yeah, from the fetch, and copy everything from there, and then I'm going to move it in here. Okay, that's a bit of code redundancy, copying code, copying and pasting code around, but I'll show you how to do this more. I just want to to have a separation of stuff, so that even if you are looking into the code, you don't be confused of what you are trying to do in each of the files. Okay, so now I want to now write a query to execute multiple statements at the same time. So I'm going to say execute, execute many queries, just like that. So I'm going to have a function dev is going to be execute, let me get that spelling right. So execute underscore many underscore query, just like that. And you're going to pass in our connection, you're going to pass in the query, and you're going to pass in the value right here. Okay, so once we have that in here, what I want to go ahead and do is the following. So I'm going to say cursor, and cursor is going to be equals to our connection dot cursor, just like that. You're going to have a connection dot cursor. You're going to have a try and except block right here. So except, and you're going to accept the connector dot error, the connector.error as error, just like this. And you're going to simply going to print, I'm going to use an s string, say error, and then you're going to use curly braces and simply pass in the error here. So and say error. Error, I called it error. Okay, so once I have that, now I'm going to go ahead and do the following. So I'm going to just go ahead and simply say cursor. So I'm going to say cursor cursor dot execute. So execute, and you're going to say execute many. Many, so it's going to be many. Execute many, and you're going to go ahead and pass in our query and the val. So the val is the list of all the things that you want to insert. So let's say that you want to insert 10 students, right? So you have a list of all the students. So this val is going to be the list of all the students. So basically that's what it means. So it might be a bit confusing, but don't worry, we'll look at that in more. So we say commit connection. So we say connection dot commit, just like that, just call it like that. So yeah, that's basically it. And then we can just print a statement, say query executed, query. So query for many, let me just say query for many executed, just like that. So that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically what we need to do. So once I have this in that specified in that typed in, so what I want to go ahead and do is just write a function to try to experiment with this. So to do this, what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually the following. So I'm going to go ahead and say insert underscore students, right? It's going to be students, right? Because there are many, so I'm going to use a string literal right here. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say the following. So insert into, so insert into, and insert into the students table. So I'm going to pass in the first name, the last name, the home, that's right, the home address, yeah, address, and then the parent phone, the parent's phone, and then I'm going to say value, right? So I'm going to say values. So this is basically uppercase, so values, and this is going to be the following. So we're going to use it's a bit confusing syntax right here, but that's basically, so we have to say percentage sign, and then S, and then we're going to say the first name, the second name, and then now we want the home address, so percentage sign, and then we want the parent address, so going to be another percentage, and then S. Yeah, so that's basically it. So that's now should execute, we be able to execute multiple students. Now let's give the value of students that we want to insert. So we say values, or let's say val, and it's going to be equals to the following. So val equals to the following. So we're going to have the following. So it's going to be a tuple. So the first one is going to insert is going to be Thomas, that's the first name, and the second name is Edison, and then you're going to have the home address, let's say New York. Just write some random numbers right here, and then the phone number, let's just put some random phone number, and then let's always go ahead and say the second one is Helena. The second, that's the first name, so let's actually look at the last name of Helena, and it's going to be Helen. So Helen, and then it's going to be let's say DR, and then 1 2 3 4 whatever, and then we put in a random phone number. So yeah, just a random phone number right here. So once I have this, I can go ahead and actually execute this. So I'm just going to go ahead and execute this right here. So we can say execute many. So execute many query, and then pass in my connection, pass in my query, is going to be in the insert students query, and then pass in my values right here. So once I have this now, this should be inserted, but I also want to write the select statement. So select underscore all underscore students, select all student, and this is going to be equals to the following. So it is going to be string literals right here. Okay, so going to simply just delete this. So string literals right here, you're going to simply go ahead and say the following. So I'm going to say select everything, right? Select everything from the students table. So select everything from the students table. That's what I want to do, and then from there I want to say all underscore students, all students, is going to be equals to list of fetch data, pass in my connection object, and then pass in my select underscore all student query, and that's going to return to me. Let's say for a student in all underscore students, right, print it's going to be print, and I'm going to say print the student right there. So that's basically it. So now it's going to go ahead and insert all the students. So if you have multiple students, you can just continuously add them to this list, and then you're going to run this query to go ahead and insert all of the values inside of here, and then simply select everything and then print it out. So now we should have 3 students, because right now we just have 1 student, right? We just have Janet, and now we should we should add 2 more students, which is going to be Thomas and Helena. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually I'm going to say Python 3, and it's going to be basics, then we basics 3.py, and then run that first. So now you can see now we have 2 more students included. We have Thomas and Helena included now database. So now everything works perfectly as expected. So that's how you can execute multiple queries at the same time. So great, now you've learned all the basics of how to insert data, how to delete data, how to update data, how to select data, how to create a database, how to select which database to use, all using Python, right? So I've learned all the basics. So now I'm going to show how to convert this into a Python we're going to convert this into a class, okay? Because maybe you want to use this for a given program, or you might want to put it in a class and then make everything good and nice, right? So we're going to be using a Python class. So I'm just going to have a class underscore implementation right here, and in this class implementation, we're going to go ahead and create underscore dot init underscore dot py file right here, and then I'm going to have yeah, that's basically it. So I'm going to have another class. I'm going to call it I'm going to have another file db. I'm going to call db class, and sorry, rename this to be db class dot python. So db class dot python right here. So great. So great, now that I have that done, that's basically what we need to do. So what I want to do here, I'm going to go ahead and simply import this. I'm going to import import my from MySQL. So I'm going to say from MySQL import connector, just like that. So from MySQL, we're going to import connector. So that's basically what we need to import for now. So once we have that imported, I'm going to create a class here. I'm going to call db. I'm going to call db d data base, just like that. So I'm going to have a database. You're going to have a constructor, which is just basically underscore underscore init underscore init method, basically, which is a constructor from Python. So if you're coming from other programming languages, this is basically what we call a constructor in Python. So for you to first create a database, we need your URL to the database, right? So we also need the user, and also need the password, just like that. So great. So we're going to use that. You're going to say self.url is going to be equals to the URL that the user passed in, and you're going to say self.user is going to be the user that the user passed in, right? So we're not going to go ahead and store your password, because for security reasons. Maybe there's another way that we can encrypt the password and then decrypt it when we want to use it and stuff like that. But for now, I'm just going to keep things simple. I'm not going to store the user's password just for security reasons, because I don't want anybody accessing the user's password, right? Also, I'm going to say self.connection. So we're going to have another method which we're going to be connecting to our database. So we have connect to DB for now. So I'm going to have that connect to DB here for now. So what I'm going to have the connection function called db connection connect underscore to underscore db, which is connect to database. So what you're going to have the self keyword. In Python, all your method must have the self keyword. So I'm taking the password of the user, and you're going to go ahead and connect to the database. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually copy the code. So I'm just going to close this up, close all this up, go in here and then copy the code that we use to connect to our database, and just simply you reuse the same logic right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and simply paste it right here. So that's basically the same logic, right? So go ahead and then fix that indentation. So once I have this, I'm going to go ahead and simply say self.url, and this will be self.user. So this will be self.user, and then the password is the password that you are going to pass in here. So that's basically it, and that should connect to our database. So that's all we need for the connection code. So once we have we can use this right here. We can say self.connection is going to be equals to self.connect to database, and you're going to pass in the password right there, the password. So great, that's going to connect to our database. So once a password we initialize this, we need to pass in the URL of the database, the username and the password, and that should connect to our database automatically. So once we have that, now we should now go ahead and write the function to create our database. So I'm going to write that function right here. So I'm going to say def, and it's going to be called, I'm going to call it create underscore db, and it's going to have the self keyword. You're going to take in the database name. Okay, so db name, whatever you want to call it. So db name, and I'm going to say cursor, and the cursor is going to be equals to self.connect connection, right? Self.connection and cursor. So it's going to generate a cursor object for us. So once you have the cursor, we can go and actually execute query to create a database. So if I go back in here, we have this query right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply copy this, and then simply go in here and simply paste it in here. That's all we need to do. So select all of this and then fix that indentation. So that's all we need to go ahead and simply create our database. But now this is not going to be we're going to write our own query right here. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say query. The query is going to be equals the following. So like give a string literals right here, and this is going to be equals to create database database if not exists. So create database if not exists, and you're going to go ahead and pass in the name of our database. So go ahead and pass in a database. I'm going to say data base. So I'm going to make this a string and a string right here. So a string, and then you're going to go ahead and simply that database that the user is going to pass in is going to be pasted here. So if the user passes in a database called students, then it's going to be say create database if not exists, and then student, right? Yeah, that's basically it for creating the query for creating our database. Now let's write the one for executing our database. So I'm going to go down here and simply say def. You're going to say execute underscore query. Then you're going to go ahead and simply pass in the self, and you're going to have the query that you want to execute, right? So to do this, we're going to go ahead and create a cursor object. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually copy the code for executing that we have, or execute query. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply copy this code right here, and then simply reuse it. So I'm going to ahead and paste it right here, and then I'm going to go ahead and fix all those indentations right here. So once I have this, it's going to be self.connect connection right dot cursor, and this is going to be self dot connection. So it's going to change this to be self dot connect connection dot commit right here. Yeah, that's basically what I need to do right there for that to work. So now we have the one for fetching the data. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it right here to for fetching our data. So it's going to be def, it's going to be fetch underscore data, and you're going to have the self keyword and then the query that you want to execute. And let's go ahead and get the code for fetching data. So it's going to be into in here. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the code that we want to use to fetch our data from the database. So it's going to be this code right here. So I'm just going to go ahead, copy that and go in here and then simply paste it in here, and we have to fix those indentation errors. So fix those indentations, and yeah, so this is going to be self.connection, just like that. Yeah, that's basically what we need to do for that. So we are done with that bit. We are done with that part basically. Yeah, so that's that. And also we can execute many if you want. If you can also add that query if you want. So execute many. You can just go ahead and simply copy this right here, and then you can simply add it to your class right here. So just go to execute underscore many underscore query. So execute many query. You're going to pass in the self, so self, and then the query that we have. So self and query and the value, right? So self query and the value, and you're just going to go ahead and simply paste that in here, and then fix the indentations that we have. So fix those indentations right here, and then change this to be let me just select it wherever it appears. It's going to be self dot connection, just like that. So that's basically it. Yeah, so that's basically it for what we need to do for that. So we have converted basically this our normally written code into a simple class basically that we can use. So actually let's write a bit of code to test it out. I'm going to say test.py right here. So in test.py, we can go ahead and actually create an object of this class, and then simply try to call the different methods and do different stuff with it. So right, so I'm just going to actually keep things very simple here in here. So I'm going to say from db class, right? I'm going to go ahead and import database, right? I'm going to say from env import load env load load.env, and I'm going to also import os. So import os right here. So what do we need to do in here? I'm going to go ahead and simply load my environment variables, and I'm going to say db, right? So db is going to be equals to phone. So db is going to be equals to database, and you're going to pass in the URL to be local host, right? That's the URL, and then you need to pass in the root, the user, which is going to be the root user, and then you need to pass in now the password, and the password I stored it inside of my environment variable. So I'm going to say os.get get env, and then pass in the password. So you can get retrieve our password from the env file that we have. So that's basically it. So if I go back in here, clear this up, and then simply run so let me just say ls, and then change directory into class implementation, and then simply do python 3 and then test.py, and then run that. So you can see connection to database has been successful. Good. So now we can go ahead and actually write our query. So db.create underscore db. You can create a database right here, and you can just call it. You can give it the database name. So you can give it a database. Let's call it a test database. So if I go back in here, right now I don't have any database called test. Even if I refresh, I don't have any database called test. Right. So let's go and actually execute the code, and let's see what we get. So run this. So you can see now the database has been created. So if I go in here and then simply refresh this, now you can see we have the test database right here, and right now it has no table inside of it, right? So you can actually write the table to get write the code to insert table inside of that database. So to do that, we can just go ahead and write the first of all, let's select the, which database we want to use. So I'm going to say select underscore db, and this is going to be equals to this is going to be a string literal. You're going to say select you're going to say use you're going to say use, and then simply test So once we have that written in there, we can just go ahead and actually execute it. So we can say db.execute. So db.execute, and you can execute query. So execute query, and you can pass in our query that you want to execute. So you say query, and the query is going to be equals to select underscore db. So select db right here. So once we have that, you can simply go ahead and run that, and that should execute the execute. And now the query has been executed, and that's for now we are going to be using our test database. Yeah, so now we can go ahead and actually create a simple table in there, and then just simply test it out. So I'm going to simply say create underscore table, and this is going to be a string literal, so like this. And you're going to simply say create table if not exists. So we're going to call it, it's going to be let's call it a person table. This is a random test. We're just basically testing out our class to make sure it works as we expect it to. So we're going to have an ID. It's going to be of type not null, and then it's going to be primary key, and then auto underscore increment. So auto increment. And then we also have we can have the name of the person, and it's going to be a varchar, a variable character, let's say 40 characters, not more, and it's not null. Just going to also have a year of something, so year, and it's going to be another variable character, let's say 5 characters, and also you can say not null. That's basically it. So once we have this, you can actually execute this query. So how do you execute a query? You can say db db.execute execute query, and you pass in our query, execute query, and you pass in our query. So the query, and the query is going to be the following. So the query is going to be create table. That's basically it. So once you execute, it's going to go ahead and simply create that table. So if I execute this right now, it has been executed. Now if you go back to in here and then simply refresh this, now you can see now we have one table there. In the table it says called person, which has these columns that we specified, the ID, the name, and then the year. Okay, so yeah, so let's actually try to just insert some data inside of that table, and that's basically it. So let's say insert data, and this is going to be equals the following. So I'm going to use a string literal right here. So I'm going to say let's say insert into the person database, and then you're going to say values, the value rather, and you're going to say null, going to say null because of the ID. We don't want this auto incremented, so we just say null, and then just say the name is going to be John. Sorry, the name is going to be John Doe, and then we also have the year, right? So just the year. So let's say 2022. That's basically it, and then we can end this with a semicolon right there. So that's basically what we have. So what I want to go ahead and do right now is just execute it to insert the data. So we say db.execute execute query, and then simply pass in our query that you want to execute, and the query is basically it will insert underscore data into our database. So if I go ahead and simply go in here, run this code, it has been data has been inserted. So the data has been inserted inside of the database. Now let's write the code to actually select the data or to view the data inside of there. So I'm just going to say fetch underscore data is going to be equals to the following. So it's going to be a string literals, a string literal, and then this is going to be equals to the following. So I'm going to say select right star, select star from person. So select star from person, and then that's basically it. So we can actually go ahead and execute this. So we can say we can just say for person in list, right? db dot fetch fetch data, and you're going to pass in a query, and the query is going to be equals to fetch data query. That's basically it. So what you want to do is just simply print person. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fetch the data in this part of the code, and then simply convert it into a Python list, and then simply iterate through it and print it out. So once we have that, so we can simply run this code. Now you can see first and second is it's the same person, because every time you write the code, a new person is being inserted, right? Because we don't have any unique values or anything like that. Yeah, so that's basically it, how we can convert that into a Python class, and then basically be able to use this class in other applications that you want to create. Yeah, so you can create an application using Tkinter, and you can use this class to handle the inserting database operations and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically it, what I wanted us to cover in this tutorial. It has been a bit long tutorial, so if you guys have stick out till this point, then really congratulations and thank you for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed the YouTube channel, please kindly consider subscribing to the YouTube channel and join the community of Python developers for this learning programming, Python, JavaScript, web development, any technology. Just feel free to subscribe to the channel. If you have any future recommendations for videos, let me know in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks for watching. Keep safe. See you in the next video.